When Oreshnik flew, Putin thought he had unleashed Russia's trump card. This was the unstoppable missile, hypersonic, nuclear-capable, a tangible warning to Ukraine and its partners that Russia could do a lot more than it has in Ukraine. The key word here being could. It can't anymore. Ukraine's Flamingo missile just hit the heart of Russia's nuclear threat, leaving Oreshnik grounded and Putin's nuclear bluff in tatters. On February 5th, United 24 Media was among several outlets to report on what may be the most important long-range strike that Ukraine has ever carried out. Ukrainian-made Flamingo missiles flew for hundreds of miles through Ukrainian territory and toward Russia's Astrakhan region, which is in southwest Russia. Running along the lower Volga River and bordered by Kazakhstan, that entire region is dangerous to Ukraine due to its proximity to the border that Ukraine shares with Russia. However, Astrakhan is also dangerous because it's home to Kapustin Yar, and in Kapustin Yar lies a missile testing facility that Russia is using to launch one of its most dangerous missiles, Oreshnik. The missile that Russia used to attack Lviv just a few short weeks ago. Ukraine wanted revenge for that Lviv strike, and you'll learn why in just a few minutes. That revenge came in the form of Flamingo missiles, which flew right through Russia's air defenses in Kapustin Yar to score direct hits against the very base from which Russia launched its hypersonic missiles in the attack against Lviv. This is a massive success for Ukraine, and the country's general staff was quick to take to Telegram to explain why. During January 2026, the Defense Forces of Ukraine carried out a series of successful strikes on a complex of hangar-type buildings at the Kapustin Yar test site in the Astrakhan region of the Russian Federation, where pre-launch preparation of intercontinental and medium-range ballistic missiles is taking place, using long-range strike weapons of Ukrainian production, in particular the FP-5 Flamingo, the General Staff reported. It also added that it has evidence that the January strike was successful, adding, according to available information, several buildings on the test site were damaged to varying degrees. One of the hangars was significantly damaged, and some of the personnel were evacuated from the site. Kapustin Yar may not have been shut down completely. However, it was hit hard enough to slow down any attempt that Russia may have been making to launch more Oreshnik missiles at Ukraine. And even more importantly, Ukraine sent a message with this attack. We just hit Oreshnik in its home, and we can do it again. More evidence of what Ukraine achieved comes from the Excelenova Plus Telegram channel. On the same day that Ukraine's general staff made its announcement, that channel published a satellite photograph of Kapustin Yar. It also confirmed that Ukraine carried out the attack on the night of January 27th into 28th, and that Ukraine's Flamingo drone missile hybrids appeared to focus on what it calls the 105th site of the missile testing facility. In particular, Ukraine hit several hangars that Russia uses for pre-launch preparations of its missiles. Presumably, Oreshnik is among those missiles. If those hangars have been destroyed, Russia now has to rebuild them before it can even consider using Oreshnik again. And what Russia is able to rebuild, Ukraine can once again destroy. After all, Flamingo has the power, and Ukraine is pumping up production. Toward the end of September, Militani reported that the makers of Flamingo, Firepoint, had purchased a large stock of old aircraft engines for the purposes of ramping up production. Those engines aren't suitable for their original use anymore. However, they're more than capable of powering along a drone missile hybrid that makes a one-way trip to Russia, lasting just a few hours. With repairs and modifications, those engines offered Firepoint a cheap way to get its Flamingo weapons off the production lines and into Ukraine's hands. At the time of the article's publication, Militani said that Firepoint was making 2 Flamingos per month. By the end of 2025, it aimed to hit a monthly production of 200. While we don't know if Firepoint was successful in achieving that goal, what this tells us is that Ukraine is going all in on the missile that it used to attack Russia's main Oreshnik base. That's worrying for Putin for several reasons, all of which we'll explain later in the video, but for now, Putin has to worry about the fact that Ukraine is building plenty of a weapon that's far more terrifying than any of the long-range drones that it's used to attack Russian targets in the past. You see, Flamingo is no ordinary drone. It's a cross between a cruise missile and a drone, which means that it can deliver immense amounts of destruction over large distances, with far more control than a typical fire-and-forget cruise missile offers. The Flamingo's raw specifications reveal why that's the case. This drone missile hybrid is capable of traveling distances that exceed 3,000 kilometers or about 1,860 miles. There aren't many other weapons in Ukraine's arsenal that even come close to that range, which means Flamingo is capable of hitting targets that other weapons simply can't reach. And when it hits those targets, it does so with devastating force. Flamingo isn't like a typical long-range drone, which may carry a relatively small warhead that can destroy infrastructure but perhaps isn't suitable for taking out hardened targets such as hangars. Rather, Ukraine's new drone missile hybrid brings a 1,150 kilogram warhead to whatever target Ukraine sets it on. That amounts to over 2,500 pounds of explosive fury, all wrapped in a unique drone packaging that can hit speeds up to 950 kilometers or about 590 miles per hour. What we're seeing here are specifications for a cruise missile-like weapon that are better than those offered by America's Tomahawk missiles. And here's the best part for Ukraine, and that part will make Putin cry: a Flamingo costs 5 times less to produce than a Tomahawk. The Flamingo is fast enough to blaze right past air defenses, can fly low enough that those defenses often can't see it coming, and it can hit hard enough to do something that Putin never thought Ukraine would be able to do. That something was on full display in Kapustin Yar, as one of Russia's most important facilities was left in chaos after the Flamingo took flight. This was revenge, and that revenge will taste sweeter to the people of Lviv than it will to anybody else in Ukraine. On the night leading into January 10th, Russia conducted yet another of its massive aerial strikes against Ukraine's cities and energy infrastructure. Much of what Russia sent flying into Ukraine struck Kyiv, leading to Putin's missiles and drones killing 4 and injuring 22 in the city. As tragic as this attack was, the more worrying threat was sent in the direction of Lviv. According to Al Jazeera, Ukraine reported that an unidentified ballistic missile that was traveling at around 13,000 kilometers or 8,000 miles per hour struck critical infrastructure in Lviv. That missile was later identified as an Oreshnik. And Russia very purposefully sent its hypersonic missile to strike a city that is only around 70 kilometers or 45 miles from the border that Ukraine shares with Poland. We'll explain why that's important soon. But as for Oreshnik, not a lot is known about the missile outside of what Russia and various analysts have suggested are likely its capabilities. It's clearly hypersonic, as demonstrated by the attack on Lviv. Al Jazeera adds that Oreshnik is also believed to be a medium-range missile, and that it can likely fly for between 1,000 and 1,600 kilometers or 620 to 990 miles before striking its target. The missile appears to be based on the design for the RS-26 Rubezh, which Russia began developing in 2008. And some proclaim that its destructive force is equivalent to that of a nuclear warhead, even when it's armed with a conventional one. Oh, and speaking of nuclear warheads, Oreshnik is also supposedly nuclear capable. Russia was certainly quick to crow about what it achieved during its January strike. Just 2 days after reports broke of the use of Oreshnik in Lviv, the Moscow Times reported that the Russian military had claimed that its strike on the city took out a Ukrainian aircraft repair plant. On the night of January 9th, the Lviv State Aircraft Repair Plant was put out of action by the Oreshnik mobile ground-based missile system, Russia's Ministry of Defense claimed. Ukraine didn't confirm this, instead stating that Oreshnik had hit what it called a civilian target. Still, the message that Russia wanted to send was clear: Oreshnik is ready. Only it may not be anymore due to what Ukraine's Flamingo drone missiles did in late January. And if Oreshnik has been taken out of commission because of the strike against its primary launch site, that's going to be a major problem for Russia, even if the Kapustin Yar facility is only offline temporarily. Why? Well, before we answer that question, this is just a quick reminder that you are watching The Military Show. And if you're looking for more insight like this, remember to subscribe to see our videos as soon as we publish them. Now, the first answer to the question that we just posed is that Ukraine's strike on Kapustin Yar is important as much for what it represents as for what it achieved. Yes, Ukraine has taken a key Russian launch site offline, hopefully for an extended period of time. That means no more Oreshnik launches until Russia is able to get the site up and running again. However, as Euromaidan Press points out, Ukraine's Flamingo strike represents the first known case of a non-nuclear state successfully attacking infrastructure that is used to repair nuclear-capable ballistic missiles on the territory of the country that has made those missiles. This is massive, as we'll explore in more detail in a few moments. Ukraine has just called Putin's nuclear bluff with this attack. Ukraine has shown Russia that it isn't afraid of what Oreshnik is supposed to be capable of delivering. In essence, Ukraine is daring Russia to strike back with the ultimate response. Flamingo drone missiles just hit your nuclear infrastructure, Putin. Are you going to respond with a nuclear attack, thus destroying the very few shreds of goodwill that you have left in the world? Or are you going to reveal that all of your nuclear threats were bluffs that you were using to get what you wanted out of Ukraine? Ukraine is betting it's the former. And in making that bet, it has destroyed the perception of invincibility that Putin is trying to build around Oreshnik. After all, it's true that Ukraine will seriously struggle to shoot Oreshnik missiles down when they're in flight. Any nation would. As Army Recognition noted in August 2025, no existing air defense system can reliably intercept and destroy a hypersonic missile before it reaches its target. Interception is possible, however, it's unlikely, and that is a serious problem for Ukraine, as even its US-made Patriot air defense systems struggle when confronted with missiles like Oreshnik. That's where the perception of invincibility comes from, and Ukraine has shattered that perception by doing what it seems to constantly do in its war against Russia, thinking outside the box. If Oreshnik can't be taken down reliably when it's in flight, then the solution to the Oreshnik problem becomes simple. Take the missile out at its source, and it won't ever get into the air. Right now, it's unknown whether Ukraine's attack on Kapustin Yar actually destroyed any Oreshnik missiles. However, the sources we've already discussed suggest that Ukraine has damaged Russia's missile preparation facilities. Without those facilities, missiles like the Oreshnik become extremely expensive paperweights that Russia can't use. Interestingly, Euromaidan press also suggests that Ukraine's January strike may go some way toward flipping the deterrence balance. Missiles like Oreshnik represent a type of threat that Ukraine can't pose to Russia. Even if you take nuclear capabilities out of the equation, Oreshnik is faster and, if Russia is to be believed, can hit harder than anything that Ukraine has in its arsenal. That is still the case, even when taking Flamingo into account. But the real key here is that Flamingo was never supposed to exist. Ukraine didn't have anything like this drone missile hybrid before Putin launched his invasion, and it took years to develop these types of deep strike weapons after Russia's soldiers crossed the border. In short, Ukraine didn't have any kind of deterrent against Russia's missiles. Now it's proven that it has a deterrent. It's not that Ukraine used Flamingo. By October 2025, Militani was reporting that Ukraine had already used Flamingo 9 times within about a month of the missile entering production. What's vital about this latest strike is that Ukraine has proven that it can use Flamingo drone missiles to score direct hits on one of Russia's most critical strategic sites. Kapustin Yar is needed to launch Oreshnik. That means it will be loaded with the best air defenses that Russia has, and Flamingo still bypassed them all to score a hit. Putin will see that and be terrified about what it means once Ukraine has scaled up its Flamingo production to the point where it's built a strong stockpile. Kapustin Yar will likely be targeted many more times, but there are plenty of other Russian sites within the Flamingo's range that are associated with the Russian nuclear complex. The Non-Proliferation Policy Education Center has an interactive map showcasing many of these sites, both active and inactive. What's to stop Ukraine from hitting the Shaikovka air base? That is close to Ukraine's border with Russia, is home to some of Russia's heavy bombers, and is believed to be a nuclear weapons storage site. Or what about Russia's Chakalovsk air base? Located in the Kaliningrad Oblast, this base serves Russia's Baltic Fleet and may well help to facilitate the shadow fleet that is keeping oil money flowing into Russia. Many bases like these are well within the range of Flamingo drone missiles and are unlikely to be as well defended as the Kapustin Yar facility that is home to some of Russia's most valuable missiles. Putin has to be asking himself the question, if Ukraine can hit the Oreshnik launch site, what else can it now hit? The answer is likely dozens of Russian bases, including many that are hundreds of miles from the border regions that Ukraine has traditionally targeted. This is what we mean when we say that Ukraine now has the sort of deterrent that Russia never thought it would have. Any attack launched from a base that is within range of the Flamingo drone missile now creates an opportunity for retaliation. Ukraine can shut down Russian operations in ways that Putin can't even imagine, assuming it's able to scale Flamingo production properly and it has the appropriate intelligence to ensure its new drone missile can hit the right targets. Not every base that Ukraine will hit in the future will be part of Russia's nuclear weapons complex. However, the fact that Kapustin Yar has been struck is huge for that very reason. We touched on Putin's nuclear bluff a couple of times already in this video. We've explained that Ukraine's Kapustin Yar strike could be seen as the calling of that bluff. But this aspect of Ukraine's strike isn't really about Ukraine. It's about Europe. When Russia struck Lviv with Oreshnik, it was actually letting Europe know that the Baltic states and Poland were within range of its new hypersonic missile. Another 40 miles or so and Oreshnik could have hit Poland. Putin wanted to make sure that Europe collectively knew this because he wanted to use Oreshnik to push Ukraine's European allies and partners away. The threat didn't work, but it was made. Mainstream news outlets such as the UK's Sky News picked up on what Putin was trying to say with the Lviv Oreshnik attack. It reported on claims made by Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha that Oreshnik represents a grave threat to Europe. Sky News added that the timing of the launch is especially pointed given Russia's recent changes to its nuclear deterrence doctrine and lowering of its threshold for nuclear response. Even before the Oreshnik strike, the Jamestown Foundation was reporting that Russia had transitioned to nuclear intimidation to try to get what it wants out of the war. In a December piece, it noted that Russia's defense minister Andrei Belousov had held a special session of the Russian Security Council the previous November, which he used to justify Russia's decision to prepare for potential nuclear tests. All of these are signals to Europe, perhaps even more than they are to Ukraine. Stay out of Russia's business and the nuclear threats won't escalate into nuclear action. The threat might have held up if Ukraine hadn't taken action, but it has. Kapustin Yar has been attacked, and it seems almost inevitable that more Flamingo drone missiles will take flight in that base's direction in the future. Pressure is being placed on Putin to put his money where his mouth is. Russia keeps making nuclear threats. Now back them up. Respond with a nuclear strike to a conventional attack and watch as your country becomes a global pariah, the likes of which the world has never seen. Ukraine knows that Putin won't go that far. Whatever inroads Russia is trying to make with the US would fall to pieces. China would likely withdraw from Russia, costing Putin his most powerful ally. It's unlikely that India would stick around either. Using Oreshnik, as Putin has subtly and sometimes unsubtly suggested that it could be used, would be the end for Russia. Ukraine knows it, and at the end of January it proved it to Europe and the rest of the world. After all, Oreshnik is far from Russia's only nuclear-capable weapon. If Putin was going to back up his threats, he would have done so by now with any number of other nuclear-capable missiles. The nuclear bluff has been called and Putin has been exposed as holding no cards. There's an interesting postscript to this story. As United 24 media reports, Zelensky has made it a point to note that Flamingo is getting better. Speaking during a December 2025 briefing, Ukraine's president said, "There was a recent use. 5 missiles were launched, 1 destroyed the target, and 4 were intercepted by Russian air defense. All of this is getting stronger in practice, month by month." In other words, the version of Flamingo that just hit Kapustin Yar isn't the best version of the drone that will ever exist. If anything, it's the earliest version. Ukraine will keep refining, it will keep testing and tweaking, working out how to make Flamingo better to ensure that it can evade Russian air defenses even better than it already does. Every time that Putin gives Ukraine an excuse to use Flamingo, the drone missile gets better. Putin may want to repeat what Russia did in Lviv in early January. Ukraine just showed Russia that it has a weapon that can hit hard enough to show Putin why that would be a very bad idea. Ukraine's calling of the Russian nuclear bluff has arrived not a moment too soon. Europe is well aware that Putin isn't going to stop with Ukraine and that he has eyes set on several of NATO's member states. German intelligence has revealed that a Russian attack on NATO is imminent, and you can learn all about it in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you're subscribed to the Military Show so you never miss our coverage. And thank you for watching.